الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب صدق الله مولانا العظيم. Have we not expanded your breast for you, and we have taken off from you and your burdens, which had weighed down your back, and we have exalted for you your remembrance. So verily, with every hardship there is ease. Again, surely with every hardship there is ease. Therefore, when you are free, still labor hard, and to your Lord turn your attention.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Council. Everyone, please be seated. Before we begin, and welcome to this meeting of the Council. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Council. Before we begin, would members please sit in the allocated seats, silence their mobile phones, stand up when proposing and seconding items, and switch microphones on and off immediately afterwards. If there is an emergency, turn left out of the chamber, follow the green emergency exit signs to the main town hall entrance, and assemble in St. George's Square. Please note this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Any members of the public present are entitled to take photographs, film, audio record, and report on the business held in public, but must not act in a disruptive manner. If they do so, they may be asked to leave. I now invite Councillor Hazel Simmons, the Executive Leader of the Council, and Councillor Javed Hussain, the Deputy Executive Leader, to make a presentation to the Council on navigating the challenges and laying the foundations for a thriving town.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members. Good evening, members of the public that are here with us tonight. Well, we have certainly had a tough few years, haven't we? Years of government austerity, followed by the pandemic, followed by the emergency budget, and then the cost of living crisis has put massive pressure on all of our services. And I'm afraid that pressure is still on, with 10.5% of Luton households living in destitution and 11% of Luton households struggling to meet basic needs. It is a stark reminder of the work that remains to be done. This is why poverty sits at the heart of our 2040 vision. It is great that this collective town-wide 2040 vision is bringing people together around a coherent plan to make life better for the people of our town. And it is right that as part of this presentation, we take a moment to reflect on some of the achievements over the last 12 months while setting out some of our priorities for the next year. However, before we do this, I want to set out some of the context. The last few years have been extremely difficult. I don't need to say that to many of you here. Many of us can think of friends and family no longer with us, taken away far too soon by the tragedy of COVID-19. Despite the serious deprivations we faced from 14 years of government austerity, rather than being supported in our struggles with the passing of each year, our funding has decreased. Over this extended period, the Council has had its support from Westminster slashed by 170 million. We are on the receiving end of the second highest gap between resident need and central government funding in the country. The importance of the reform of local government finance is imperative to change this. However, this does not seem to be on the agenda for the immediate future, and I assure you we will continue to lobby government and any future government for fair funding for Luton. Central government still expects us to carry out a huge number of statutory tasks, yet despite this, it is unwilling to adequately fund us. This is not unique to Luton. Councils up and down the country are reporting unbearable strains, some sadly even becoming bankrupt. Thankfully, Luton is not in this situation, although we've had to tighten our belts much more than we would have wished this year. With lack of support from the government, much of the burden inevitably falls upon the shoulders of residents. Regretfully, we will be increasing council tax. We know this will be difficult for many and will continue to encourage those in the greatest hardship to apply for additional discretionary support. High inflation, increased interest rates and the consequences of global conflict have had a massive, vicious knock-on effect on the pockets of us all. And whilst we have all had to bear the consequence of this, as always, it is the vulnerable and deprived whose lives have been impacted the most. The cost of living crisis still means that many are having to make heart-wrenching decisions on a daily basis. Tough times, overwhelming times. However, we may be down, but Luton is not out. We continue to punch above our weight, not just by delivering outcomes, not just by hitting targets, but by improving lives. This is what is at the heart of Luton 2040, making a genuine difference to people, individuals and families who cannot help themselves or who need a helping hand through a time of difficulty. This is something the Council cannot do on its own. In everything we do, our focus has always been on supporting those in most need through cooperation with amazing, devoted community partners. Countless people, as well as groups and organisations such as Food First, Luton Supporting You and Luton Access, continue to provide first-class help to anyone who is struggling. Our charity and community organisations are inspirational. Last year, Just Giving reported that Luton was the third most generous town in the UK. Residents give not only out of their hard-earned cash, but also with their time and energy as well. Individual acts of charity are matched on a larger scale by our airport company, Luton Rising. We are able to support the work of many voluntary and community organisations, giving away millions of pounds, thanks to the success of our airport, which is once again proving to be one of the most attractive in the country after the COVID depression. I am proud to stand here today and tell you that every passenger through London Luton Airport, Luton Rising, is investing 53 pence in our town. That is 26 pence more than the contribution of any other UK airport, and this level of financial aid enables our voluntary and community sector to thrive despite the uncertain wider context for charitable funding. The good news is that despite everything Luton has had to endure in the recent years, we are supporting people now and making a difference to people's lives today. But we are not simply concentrated on the here and now. We are also utterly committed to the future and working with partners across the town to deliver on Luton 2040, for a town where no one has to live in poverty and everyone can thrive. This is absolutely vital. We know that poverty and inequality severely limits the success of our residents in education, health and employment. That is why it is at the heart of our vision. Obviously, 2040 is a long way off, but every journey begins with initial steps, and we are already seeing tangible progress. Here in Luton, we have the highest net new job creation in British cities and large towns between 2010 and 2022. Even ahead of London, with the second highest business start-up rate in the country, fifth highest proportion of private sector jobs, third fastest broadband in the country, third lowest level of emissions per capita in the country. These are achievements of which we can be proud, but there is always more to do. Poverty is a complex problem. If there were a magic wand, we would have used it a long time ago, wouldn't we? Our approach to solving a difficult solution is to make and consolidate steady progress. This has enabled us to see key achievements in various areas, and I would now like to hand over to the Deputy Leader, Javed Hussain, to explain some of these are. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. I'm more than happy to outline some of the achievements that have been made so far. To serve as a councillor in a town that I've lived for 45 years. It gives me immense pleasure, and it gives me joy that we can collectively give something back to the community. It's been an exciting year. So much has happened, many being widely known, but there are plenty less appreciated items. So here are some of the key achievements. The launch of our new employment and skills strategy, which will ensure that ultimately a resident will benefit from the new jobs we are creating. We all know one of the key things to lift people out of poverty is through skills and education. Kickstarting our employment scheme to support Luton's young people into a work and a bright future. Retaining 6 green flag park, much loved and highly used parks for a key centre for relaxation, well-being and social activity. We've already got a number of businesses that have signed up to the Good Business Charter, which raises the standard of business practice throughout the town and make it more attractive to inward investment. Beginning work on the town centre master plan, which will change the face of Luton. We have already seen progress with the opening of Hat Gardens. Last year, we spent over $5 million dealing with potholes, patching repairs, resurfacing works and other treatments to prevent potholes, even though we could spend double that, but we can only spend what we can afford. We opened the DART to and from the airport. With over 2 million passengers have already used this, making our airport more competitive and underline our drive to get people to use more sustainable forms of transport. The introduction of hip-hop bus tickets, I'm just going to elaborate on that. That essentially gives you, for £2, you can travel to Watford, you can travel to Bedford. You know, it just shows you that you couldn't even do that by your own car. And we're hoping that that will help us make that modal shift to more sustainable transport rather than and reduce the car usage, and also help with some of the parking issues that we see in the town. Supported business and with the residents in Bury Park. As you know, most of the banks left Business Park, Bury Park, and there was a crying out need for a banking hub, which is, I'm glad to report that it's taken very well with the community in Bury Park, that they are making use of the banking hub. And I want to acknowledge my thanks to the residents of Beach Hill and the officers here for helping the football. Within 14 weeks, spending 10 million isn't easy, and in coordinating everything and with all the issues they had with short notices of road closures, I want to put that on record that, that was really, a mammoth effort from both the residents to accept what they had to accept and the officers for helping make sure that all the permits were in place. We've started switching our council's vehicles to hydrogenated vegetable oil, which is meant to be 90% lower emission than diesel. Only last week, family hubs were launched, which will provide advice and support on families in our town and navigate the intricacies of raising children in a modern-day Britain. We continue to work to our Black Lives Matter motion of creating a town of equal opportunity and fairness, a town where the bright future is shared equally by all. These are just some of the things that we have delivered. Given all the challenge we have faced, given the amazing number of achievements I've just outlined, it would be tempting to step back, but that is not going to happen. That will never happen under this administration. There is plenty more to do, and there will be no point when we think we have done enough. Each day and every day, we continue to all we can do to improve the residents.
How quickly did our flags come down in Bury Park? This Labour-led council
Can we ask the public gallery to desist?
Water and electricity from the people of Gaza.
Okay. Can I ask all members to please leave the chamber? Can I ask all the members to please leave the chamber, and we will reconvene when the public order galleries convene.
We need our representatives to be our voice. Take the picture.
Good evening again. I'd like to bring this meeting back in order. So I hand back to Councillor Javed Hussain, presenting the vision that they have for and the challenges for the future of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to apologise everybody in the chamber for the disruption. I think we all, and also thank everybody in this chamber for, as one of the highlights last year, we all unanimously voted for a ceasefire. We've done everything we could as a local authority. You know, maybe it's not enough for some people, but we did, and I would like to thank everybody that was involved in putting that through. So our priorities for the next 12 months, one of the key focuses will be trying to tackle antisocial behaviour and littering. As you members will be aware that this week we've launched the War on Waste. We've increased the fines, so we will be fining individuals who are constantly causing litter in our streets. We will be, and fly tipping, we will be increasing the fines on them, and hopefully, and we will be naming and shaming them once they've been prosecuted. We will not be naming anybody unless they've been through prosecution. Equally important is I want our residents to understand that one of the focus that we need to do and re-educate is around recycling. Every time we put money into the landfill, we're actually throwing away vital money that could be used for children's services, for adult services, and we wouldn't be having to increase council tax tonight if we could make some of that saving. Equally, another big priority for us is look at how we're creating more jobs, and part of that is next year we hope that we'll have some feedback from the government as to whether they will give us the approval for the second terminal for the DCO, you know, which is potentially 11,000 jobs for Luton residents or residents. And also I look forward to some of the other big things we've got which will create jobs. So we've got the stage development which will move forward. We hope in the next year we'll have the detailed planning from the football club, which again is a major, will help reshape our town centre. We expect that Henry Boots will bring forward their plans, detailed planning for the biofuel business, so potentially from 330,000 they're going to take up to 700,000 square foot, which can only be a good thing for Luton. And I think most of us will be aware that at the junction, which is at Junction 10, there's a lot of work going on there. That's potentially more jobs for Luton people. So I hope over the next year we'll see some of these projects moving forward and help regenerate the town centre whilst creating work for our residents. And after years of lobbying, unfortunately, it's not what we want, but we will be having the lift-free access on the train station. You know, we expect that the next year that work will begin on that. Unfortunately, we wish the whole station was redeveloped, but we will carry on lobbying for that, and we hope that we'll have support across the chamber for that because it affects all of us. And we will continue to invest in our highways, upgrade our parks. I think you will be all aware that recently we'll be coming to scrutiny soon is the extension for the Vale. You know, we potentially, as the current cemetery is about to run out of space, we've managed to procure some more site, which will potentially give us 7,000 graves. You know, unfortunately, it's on greenback land, but we are very landlocked. It's the only land we were in a position to purchase. And with this, I'd like to hand back to Hazel. Thank you.
Thanks, Javed. Now, I don't have to tell any of you that housing remains a huge priority for us all. Luton covers a small area of land. Land and property are at a premium. Not only do we have to care for our residents, but we also face the challenges of supporting many people we are hosting on behalf of the Home Office whilst their asylum claims are processed. We continue to need family-sized accommodation to give people the chance of living in secure, high-quality housing and are struggling to manage the ongoing crisis. I recently wrote to Michael Gove, inviting him to the town to come along and visit and try and understand the problems that were occurring here. And I promise you we will continue to lobby the government for more support and understanding for Luton's situation. Before I conclude, I would like to record the thanks of the Council for all our staff across the organisation, without whose ongoing work and continuous commitment for the people of Luton, we would not have managed through these hard times. I know we all appreciate how hard it can be on the front line, dealing with the social pressures many of our communities are experiencing. So I'd like it recorded, our thanks from Council to all our staff. Finally tonight, I want to finish by saying that there are always those who want to look down their noses at Luton. But we know that the spirit of the people is strong. We've seen it in here this evening. And we know that spirit is being seen in an increasingly positive light. Whether it's the orange on our football team shirts, the amazing step forward Luton ambassadors championing the town everywhere they go, or the resolve of our people to work and care for each other. The country is beginning to understand what we Lutonians have known all along, that Luton is a wonderful, diverse, exciting, forward-looking place to live. Just last month, BBC's Radio 1 announced that it would bring its big weekend to Stockwood Park. Whether you are a lover of Strauss, Sounds of the 70s, or a Swiftie fan, you will appreciate that this is a huge accolade for the town. Proof that Luton has not simply arrived on the national stage, but is going somewhere. We are proud to be part of that journey, a journey to 2040, and a town where everyone can thrive and no one lives in poverty.
Thank you. The first item of business is to receive the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on 23rd of January 2024, as set out on pages 3 to 10. Does the Council approve the minutes and agree to me signing them as a correct record?
Agreed.
Agreed.
I don't need to. Are there any apologies for absence from this meeting?
Mr Mayor, I've received apologies from Councillors U Ali, A Khan, R Malik and A Skeppelhorn. Councillor F Begum may be also late.
Members, please note that voting will be by exception. Other than with the exception of the motion on the budget this evening, rather than calling out each member's name to record their vote, I will ask members to indicate if they wish to vote against a motion. If no member votes against, I will declare the item carried. The outcomes will not be recorded in the minutes unless 6 members of the Council indicate that they wish for this to happen, in accordance with Standing Order 21.2. Please note that there will be an extraordinary meeting of the Council immediately following this meeting. When this meeting is called to a close, please would members remain in their seats for the extraordinary meeting.
Mr Mayor, with regards to Section 106 disclosures, all members of the Council have been circulated with a list of the items before the Council this evening which fall within the ambit of Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. Any member affected should disclose the fact and refrain from voting on any question relating to those items. Mr Mayor, I have received no Section 106 disclosures. I've also received the following disclosures of interest. There have been no disclosures of interest.
Thank you. The names of councillors voting on a budget decision must by law be recorded in the minutes of this meeting. This will apply to the next agenda item 6.1. At the appropriate time, the Chief Executive will call out each member's name in turn. Please respond with for, against or abstain so that your vote can be recorded. I now invite Councillor Roach to move agenda item 6.1.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present the Council to the recommendations of the Executive meeting held on the 12th of February 2024 in relation to the budget and capital programme for 24-25. The report is prepared against the backdrop of significant budget pressures faced by local government. There was an intense period of lobbying before the final local government settlement was announced, and government had to find some more money to address some of the challenges faced by local government, especially in the social care and the housing budget. This calls for a wider debate on local government finance settlement in order to have a strategic approach and a more sustainable funding for local government. Despite this additional late-minute funding, some councils had to obtain dispensation from government to increase their council tax up to 10%, which clearly demonstrates the impact demand-led services are taking some councils to the brink of bankruptcy. Luton is not immune to this budget challenge, and we had to work really hard over the years in order to avoid the plight faced by some of the councils up and down the country. This doesn't mean the challenges are getting easier, as we have to start every year with a £5 million budget gap. The national and global economy is highly influenced by the far-reaching economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the slowing down of the economy, the cost of living crisis, high inflation and interest rates. The UK economy fell into recession at the end of last year, and the recovery seems to be stalling, and this would have had an impact on job creation and people's lives, as interest rates are expected to stay higher for longer. Luton has done reasonably well and has the highest net new job creation in British cities and large towns, and has the second highest business start-up rate in the country. The macroeconomic and geopolitical factors have had a huge impact on the level of funding for local government in general and in the financial position of the Luton Borough Council in particular. This will continue to be the case in 24-25, as the economy will go slowly over the short to medium term, according to the Office of Budget Responsibility. The final finance settlement didn't provide any long-term sustainable funding to ease the budget pressures, and some councils are already applying for exceptional financial support from the government to avoid issuing a Section 114 notice, and the number of councils issuing Section 114 notices are increasing. The general net fund expenditure has increased by a circle of 10.5 million, around 7%. This is a measure of extent to which unavoidable cost increases exceed savings, cost reductions and increases in grant funding. These items are broken down in Appendix 1 to the budget report. This gap necessitates increasing the council tax by the maximum amount permitted, 5%, before having to go through a referendum, which will generate an additional 7.4 million of income. The ability to increase council tax by 5%, combined with prudent financial management, has allowed the council to set a balanced budget for 24-25, which includes a deficit recovery plan amounting to 5.3 million to be delivered in 24-25 in order to address the current core budget deficit. However, this will continue to be a challenge, as the cost of living crisis, stabilisation of interest rates and the slowing down of the economy makes it difficult to predict precisely what impact it will have on council finances. Despite the tough financial position, this council has managed to protect key services and also provided additional resources in order to ensure our staff are fairly remunerated. Additional resources for the care sector, additional resources in the community, neighbourhood and town regeneration budgets. We're also helping foster carers by compensating 50% of their council tax bills, as we really value the important work they do. The proposed capital programme includes significant new investments to the council's assets and infrastructure, in particular schools and highways, as well as the Stage Butte Street major regeneration project, for which 11 up grant funding and 20 million has been secured, which will create jobs, leisure amenities and over 292 new homes. There is also additional funding for highways, schools, housing, electric charging and temporary accommodation purchase scheme. This shows the council's commitment to ensure the roads are repaired and resurfaced, and not only filling potholes, investing in our infrastructure and also green projects, including local electric infrastructure. Our housing stock on speed cameras and making sure our roads are safe, just to mention a few. This capital programme is set out in full. Appendix H to the budget report is also included in the Green Book. The government is supporting people in social housing in England with the cost of living by limiting the increase in their rents. Current government policy introduced in February 2019 is to increase rent levels by CPI plus 1% per year. For 24-25, the rent increase is based on government policy, which is CPI plus 1%. Luton is proposing a rent increase of 7.7%. This is considered later on the Agenda 6.2 item. This would ensure the ongoing viability of its 30-year HRA business plan, and also enables the council to invest in housing stock and build the additional properties to meet the ever-increasing needs in Luton. Schools continue to be funded directly from the dedicated schools grant, which also funds some functions carried out by the council on behalf of schools. The DSG has increased from 167.4 million in 23-24 to 176.9 million in 24-25, which reflects the additional budget growth and pressures. In particular, the higher needs block is under significant pressure, and this has been a national issue for some time, and some councils has budget deficit which are much larger than their reserves. This block funds provision for hall-line high-need pupils and students from early years to age 25, in line with the government proposals for special education needs and disability. Due to the volatile nature of this area, demand-led pressures on the high-need block cause overspend on the DSG, which is normally covered by the use of DSG reserves. As a result of these considerable pressures, the HMB allocation for 24-25 is not sufficient to cover the full required statutory spend plan, despite making some efficiencies after consulting with the Schools Forum, and hence central DSG ring-fence reserves will be called upon to balance the budget gap of circa 0.95 million. The Council and the schools are working to ensure we have a budget which is sustainable in the medium to long term. I move the recommendation of the Executive set out in paragraph 2 to 16 on pages 1 to 4 of the report circulated separately. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Is the motion seconded?
Seconded. Reserve the right, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Now, as the said, a famous TV show, I will only say this once, so please listen carefully to the following. So, I now propose to take any questions on the report. So, before taking any questions, I would advise that, under standing orders, a member may only ask one question plus supplementaries. However, I have the discretion to allow a member to ask more than one question. In accordance with the budget protocol, I'm going to allow the first member of each of the Liberal Democrats and the Conservative groups who indicates that they wish to ask a question, to ask an unlimited number of questions and supplementaries of the mover of the motion within a total of 20 minutes each. The normal rules will then apply to all other members. Are there any questions to the report? Councillor Franks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I think we can probably find one or two questions. There is a rather vague promise in the budget presentation that was given to the Scrutiny Finance Group, which says that departments will manage demand and deliver services within existing budgets. How are you going to manage demand for special educational needs transport, for example, or adult social care, the costs of collecting and disposing of refuse? Are we going to see our black bins emptied every 3 weeks instead of fortnightly?
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't catch the last bit of that question. I do apologise. Would you repeat the last bit, the very last bit, sentence? Sorry.
Are we going to see our black bins emptied every 3 weeks instead of fortnightly?
Absolutely not. That's not even in the way any form of thinking of this administration at all. In relation to the demand, to the pressures are challenging, very challenging in social care at this moment in time. We're looking in relation to what we call our transformation programme. In relation to the PTU, there has been scope. The transformation programme is in delivery, looking to be scoped out for the PTU at the moment, when we're looking for responses on there to look at the growth and demand within that pressures of that transformation programme. But we have no plans to empty any bins, so I don't know why you threw that in, really, in all fairness.
I thank him for that reassurance. I note that you're carrying forward £3.8 million in unachieved savings from previous years. If you failed to achieve these in previous years, why should we have confidence you're going to achieve them now?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reason these are carried forward is because of the issues we had around COVID. We wanted to deliver those savings at that point, and then we had the cost of living crisis, and we're still in the cost of living crisis. The reason we brought them forward is because of those, because we just could not do it in those 2 years. So we've asked that recovery plan to be put in place to deliver those savings in the second year of this administration. Thank you.
I thank him for the brevity of his answers. It gives me a bit more time. The report to the Scrutiny Finance Group also said there's an outstanding homelessness deficit recovery amount of £2.5 million. Is this included in the 3.8 million, or is it in addition?
I need to get back to you on that one, Councillor Franks, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you. Where do we go next? Oh yes, under the heading of medium-term financial plan in the same presentation, you tell us that an additional 23 million of unidentified cuts are needed over the next 4 years. In your deficit recovery plan, a further 14 million needs to be found to fill the gap in finances up to the 31st of March 2028. With so many continuing financial gaps, just how balanced is your budget?
It's a challenge. I won't say, I have to say it's a challenge. Like all the challenges most local authorities are facing over the country today, the medium-term plan that you're looking at there indicates a deficit recovery plan over 2 years, and then we're looking at a transformation programme in relation to the rest of this administration. The transformation programme, again, is in its delivery phase, is in the development phase. There's some in the delivery phase. We will go through the processes, and you're about to see those through the normal processes of scrutiny and all the process committees that this needs to go through. So it is going to go through, it's based on the transformation programme as well as deficit recovery. Thank you.
Okay, where do we go next? Oh yes, the same presentation also says you're looking to reduce the support given to the Cultural Trust and to Active Luton. Which services are we expecting them to stop delivering?
I'll have to get back to you on that one, Councillor Franks. I'm not aware of that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, on we go. I understand the £1 million reduction in commercial income from property is largely due to landlord responsibility for things like business rates and other expenses that tenants would normally cover on buildings which are vacant. What action are you taking, please, to attract commercial tenants for these investment properties?
The action that's being taken at this moment in time is to look at all the commercial premises that we have and to bring a report back to the executive and through scrutiny to look at maybe what we can do going forward. We may have to look to maybe sell some of these assets. But there's going to be a report done and come back to the group. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the presentation that was given to the Council's union representatives. Here it says the financial strategy carries a high risk. Is this admitting that you'll continue to fail to achieve the required savings? How can you give us confidence that you're not asking us to approve yet another smoke and mirrors budget?
As I keep saying, it's a challenge. The budget is a challenge. When you make a budget, you look at all the risk, you look at the risk strategy, and within that you put in reserves and contingencies to allow for those risks. There is very positive news around this budget, but we have to admit it is a challenge going forward. It has to be observed, it has to be watched, but there is a risk strategy around it, there is reserves, there are contingencies that we could fall back on if we needed to.
Another line in the presentation to the scrutiny group announces that you're expecting a £1.5 million from the government for social care and that this will cover overspends in the current financial year. So what are you doing in 24-25? Should we expect to see reductions in either the quantity or quality of care offered?
Again, I go back in relation to the adult social care. That's where we have a lot of pressure in adult social care. We will be looking at the budget of social care through this transformation programme. The Section 151 officer is to look at it. We do not expect any cuts there. It's a statutory service which we have to deliver. Thank you.
Okay, there's not much elucidation there. Now, for many, many years, council policy on fees and charges has been to recover the cost of providing the services. The presentation to union reps again on the 4th of Jan shows 2 lines of additional income totalling £1.48 million, which is to be used as part of your cost reductions programme. Why the change in policy? To make a profit out of the charges for council services, many of which are paid for by low-income families.
Well, let's put that one right then. Firstly, there's no profit being made on services. The council do not make profit on services. We're not allowed to make profit on services. We have to cover our costs and all our overheads. Thank you.
If you're not allowed to make a profit on delivering services, then how come you're making £1.48 million, which is to be used in your cost reductions programme?
Again, we cannot make profit on costs and charges, and I'll get back to you about that second question. But we are unable to make any profit on costs and services in the council. Thank you.
Okay, these presentations are proving more interesting the further we go, aren't they? Under the heading Transformation Projects, the scrutiny presentation tells us optimisation of fees and charges, a suspicious sounding phrase, produces £230,000 of additional income. Is this in addition to the 1.48 million that you will gain by increasing charges well above what is needed to recover the costs?
I think I need to say again, Mr Mayor, this council does not make profit on fees and charges. We cover our costs. And I don't really want to say that again, Councillor, because you keep bringing that in and it's not true. So I'd rather you stop saying that now, please. In relation to the answer to your question, is no.
I'm not saying it, Mr Mayor. Both of these statements have been made in presentations given to the Scrutiny Finance Group and to the union representatives. It wasn't me that said it, it was the council that said it in those presentations. Now then, most local authorities are increasing their council tax by the government maximum of 4.9%. Why are you proposing an increase for borough purposes of 3.4%, when if you'd done what most others are doing, you'd have raised an additional £1.3 million and saved yourselves the trouble of finding £1.3 million worth of extra cuts?
The council tax was increased in line with the amount that we're allowed to, for the whole 4.99%, which includes 2% adult social care precept.
Now that's interesting, because when I played with my calculator looking at the Green Book, it actually tells me that the council tax increase for borough purposes is 3.4%, and the increase for adult social care is, where are we, 15 point something percent. I don't understand how these figures are calculated. Can you explain?
Again, if you're going through the Green Book, we need to get back to you on that. But I can confirm it was 4.99%, which includes 2% adult social care precept.
Okay, page 3 of the Green Book tells us that airport employee costs are increasing by nearly 20%. I think the actual figure's 18.5. The airport company, of course, doesn't employ anybody. It uses council employees, and the council then charges the company for the costs. Perfectly reasonable way to behave. So does this 18.5% increase reflect a real increase in salary costs, or is the council charging its airport company more than the actual costs?
I think you're referring to the bit where there's more posts included, which are fully recharged to Luton Rising. If you see the increase in external income, item 5. Not
much of an explanation. Maybe I should help him out, Mr Mayor. I suspect the increases due to the extra employees being engaged to run the DART transit system. Having said all that, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Well, you can say that to Councillor Franks, but you're not 100% sure.
Thank you. Now over to the Conservative Group. Would anybody like to ask any questions? Thank you. Now I'll move over to the general audience. So are there any questions on the report? Yes, Councillor Keynes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine's going to be fairly easy. My questions would be fairly easy. The Green Book, page 27, there is an item on there which is about 30 items down, which is Napier Park, east of Luton, 106. There's about £200,000 going into that. What's that for?
I can't hear you. Do apologise.
Which bit didn't you get? Which bit didn't you get?
So, sorry, 1 second, Rob. Councillor Keynes, I will allow you to sit. So if you just sit back, so perhaps you can speak better into the mic, yeah. So Rob can hear your question.
Right. Us geriatrics, yeah. Green Book, page 27. Item is about 30 items down. It's headed Napier Park, east of Luton, 106. There's about £200,000 gone into that. Can you tell me what that's for?
What it says is Section 106 money, so if you need to know what it's for, then we'll have to write back to you, but it's down for Section 106, which is through planning.
Say that again.
It's down as a Section 106, which is money that's given to planning through Section 106. If you need to have a bit more of a breakdown of where that goes to, we need to get back to you. Okay.
Right, okay, thank you, Councillor.
Next up, Councillor Tom Shaw.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the portfolio holder if he's worried after what Councillor Franks has just said, because you go through all the paperwork and there's no mention of free weekly bin collection anywhere. Is he now worried that the Liberals, instead of helping us with recycling, are now considering a 3 weeks bin collection in Luton because it's not mentioned in the paperwork anywhere at all? So is that the Liberal new policy for the town? Portfolio holders' views, please.
Thank you, Councillor. There's a couple of things I was concerned about. One is that, and the other one is the continuous profit being made on costs. I don't know where it came from the council. I understand you've done a call-in and mentioned about it, but I don't understand where it's come from the council. And we want to confirm here there is no plan to change the bin collection, no plan whatsoever. It's never even entered our thoughts. So please don't bring that back into the chamber. Secondly, there'll be no profit made on costs because we can't make profit on costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now like to bring in Councillor Lee Bridgen? Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So my question is regarding also about the Green Book. It's on page. Bear with me. Page 8, line 20, and it relates to services for looked after children. There's what appears to me to be a 46% cut in those services. Could you please clarify that? So it's a cut from 4.6 million to just a little under 2.5 million.
Explain to me where it is down there, Lee, please. Councillor, can you just explain to me where it is in that part of the page?
Yeah, certainly. So page 8, and it's line 20. Yeah, that's the one, yeah.
respond back in writing on that one, if I may. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, I've got Councillor Gillian Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to refer to the Green Book, please, on page 7 as well, and the schools budget, the individual schools budget. I do note that the early years provision is going from 18.3 million to 28.4 million. I can hazard a guess that some of that would be wages and an increase in the provision. But also note that the alternative provision stays static at 650,000. And that was in 22-23 and going right through to 25. I'm a little bit concerned that that would be tantamount to a budget cut, and I'd just like some clarification as to why that is.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to say, in relation to the Green Book, this is, I know it's important, and I know you want to ask questions on it, but you're getting right into the technical detail that a portfolio and a budget cannot answer correctly or properly, so I'm going to have to refer back to you. If you want to talk about the budget, that's fine. But if you want to refer to the Green Book, I'm going to have to get back to you because you're getting to what we call the technical detail, which I don't really have all the answers to tonight. Thank you.
Okay, next up I've got Councillor Steve Stevens.
Related to the Green Book, and it's page 7. It's page 17, and it's line 22. Can I understand what does the estimated drop in building technical service funds from 1,651,000 to a cut of 107,844 pounds mean for actual service provision? Sorry? It's on, as I said, it's on page 17, line 22. Line 22.
It's a BTS issue. I'm going to have to come back to you. I'm not going to go down count all the lines. Honestly, if you want to go through all the Green Book, if it's a policy you're trying to do tonight, I'm just going to refer back to you, okay? Talk about the budget. That's what we're here for.
Mr. Mayor,
just 1 minute, Councillor Stevens. Yeah, just one second. Yeah, Councillor Roach, I appreciate the line of questioning, but I think members have a right to pose the questions. So if you just receive the questions and then respond either tonight or via email, so just got to respect members' right to ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Councillor. I refer the question to Councillor Shaw.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's a BTS profit. We are one of the few councils that employs our own workforce. They're absolutely brilliant. They return a regular profit to the council. Because of the rising cost of materials this year, the profit's not going to be as big as it has been in previous years, unless you think we can work miracles. That's all that line's about. The projected profit has gone down because of the rising cost of all materials on the building sites, what we're working on, where we're building our own houses, our own council houses. That's why you've got that loss. It's not a loss, it's less profit.
Any supplementary questions, Councillor Stevens? It looks like you wanted to... Could you turn your mic on, please?
No, it was on, sorry. It's a supplementary and it's related to that question, Councillor Shaw or Councillor Roach. On page 45 of page 14, sorry, of the main agenda, there's under the BTS DLO strategic review, it says 10% year-on-year cost savings for 3 years. So how does this relate to my former question?
Somebody going to respond?
I do apologise. I thought, Councillor Shaw, could you repeat the question, please? I do apologise. Thank you, Councillor. I referred to Councillor Shaw. Sorry.
Yes, we are looking at modern building practices. We're looking at ways to increase the production down at BTS. We've got a meeting this Friday with procurement and everybody else to have a look at speeding up the procurement process. And we believe that will give us savings each year on BTS, which will increase the profits, what can be paid back to the council in future years. By getting the 10% saving down there, hopefully, if we can increase our profits, it saves cuts to a lot of the other services like adult social care, children's services. So I would have hoped, as a good Liberal councillor, you would have agreed that it's a real sensible thing to do, is look at how you can increase your profits by making savings, by building more houses, more profit to BTS, but building them in a much more efficient way and a lot cheaper.
Thank you. Next up, I've got Councillor Steve Moore.
You're right. In some ways, this is a supplementary to one of Councillor Frank's questions earlier on Active Route. I was going to ask if anyone at Active Route and the Cultural Trust had been made aware that you were looking to reduce support to them on the presentation on, I believe it was slide 19, in order so they could put their budgets together. Given that you said you need to get back to Councillor Franks on the entire prospect of looking to reduce support, can I presume that neither Active Luton nor the Cultural Trust have been made aware of that until this evening?
Again, I'll have to refer back to you, Councillor Moore. Thank you.
Okay, right, that's fine. I've got Councillor Zahu Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Green Book, page 5, item number 15. Why have HAA administration gone up so much from 21,746 to 82,040?
We'll refer back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up I've got Councillor David Wynne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The portfolio holder will be pleased to know that this is a rather more generic question, although it still relates to the Green Book. If you again turn to page 5, there is a section which refers to direct costs and income. I find the numbers somewhat curious. Could the portfolio holder explain why it is that the direct costs income statements for 2023-4 and 2024-5 are so wildly different? They seem to be totally out of proportion. I would appreciate an explanation if that's possible.
I have an answer for this one. See, the full cost, it's to do with enforcement income. It's to do with enforcement income. It's to do with enforcement income. The income was affected by reduced court sessions, expected to fully recover in 23-25. The full cost of billing and recovery was not recharged, 500k to local taxation.
Mr. Mayor, if I go back, if I look at 2023-2024 figure, I've got, what, 9.8 million? And in 2024-5, I have 14.1 million. Are you really telling me that it's that big a difference?
Yes, I am. We've got all the town centre wardens in place as well now.
Thank you. So next up, I've got Councillor Bassett Mahmood. But before you come in, could I have another show of hands so I've got you on my list? Thank you. Councillor Mahmood.
Yeah, will the portfolio holder set out what impact 14 years of austerity has had on local government finance? We've had a £44 billion black hole over the next 2 years for local authorities. Just wondering, I mean, the Liberals and the Tories both cheered those policies on, which they're now complaining about. Would you be able to set out what impact austerity has had on our budget?
Well, I think we've said what impact it had tonight. I think Councillor Simmons has explained the impact. I've explained the impact last year. I'll explain the impact again. It's been a devastating effect. And you really should be ashamed of yourselves, all of you, in all fairness, for what you put this town and the people of this town through. I will go on a little bit more about it at the end. Thank you.
Next up, I've got Councillor Richard Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a question about the money allocated to cultural services it's on page 5 of the Green Book. I appreciate that you've have to make some very difficult decisions, but given the presentation earlier about with the emphasis on promoting Luton, isn't this a backward step, reducing the amount spent from 2.5 million to 1.4 million?
Again, we said we'd give a written answer on all the questions around the Cultural Trust and Active Luton. Thank you.
Are there any further questions from members on the report? Are there any amendments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Give me a second. It's not a very long amendment, but it's quite an important one. Are you going to circulate some of these for me?
Yeah, so I will allow the amendment to be circulated, and I'll give members a couple of minutes to read the amendment, and then I will ask Councillor Franks to talk through the amendment. Thank you.
I didn't think we could refer back like this. Am I out of order here?
So, yeah, so we're just taking advice on it, because just members hold tight. Okay, can I get all members to order, please? I would like to call upon... Sorry. Order, thank you. Could I bring in Robin Porter to explain the next bit?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a few points to make. First, obviously, members, you are legally required to set a budget. The budget protocol clearly states that it's preferable to receive amendments 2 days before to enable the Section 151 officer to assess the financial implications. Dev's not had the full opportunity to assess. The Section 25 report contained within the papers clearly sets out the risk that's contained within the budget. And the finance report also sets out the mitigations that the council is putting in place and the contingency that it's putting in place. However, that all said, we need to go through the process of debating the amendment, Mr Mayor.
I call upon Councillor Franks to put forward the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In all of the time that I've been on this council, I have never before seen a budget so full of gaps and holes. Even the recommendation on page 3, look at 13, for example, talks about savings to be identified. Paragraph 43 on page 13 talks about follow-up report with details. The grid in page 46, paragraph 46, talks about, are you ready for this? Categorisation and aggregation of spend to identify opportunities for spend reduction. It talks about options appraisal for new customer relations management solutions. What does all that mean? It's absolute gobbledygook. It's nonsense. It's rubbish. You need to be some sort of, I don't know what you need to be able to make any sense of those sort of phrases. They don't make any sense to anybody at all. They're meaningless gobbledygook. They add nothing to our understanding of how you mean to balance your budget. Then there's the proposal to increase the borough purposes council tax by 3.4% rather than 4.9%. That automatically takes £1.3 million out of the budget, which means you've got to look for £1.3 million more cuts than you otherwise would have had to have done. Charging over and above the costs of providing services by £1.48 million. We're assured that the council isn't using a profit on providing services to subsidise the budget. But that's what the the presentations to both the trade union representatives and the finance scrutiny group actually said. We've got unspecified cuts in the grants to Active Luton and the Cultural Services Trust. What do you expect them to stop doing? You can't tell us. And we don't even know for sure that the two trusts have been consulted about this. So, are they pre-warned that they're going to be having some money taken off them? It's admitted in the presentation to the union representatives that the financial strategy is high risk, including carrying forward £3.8 million of unachieved cuts from previous years, which gives us no confidence that you're going to achieve them in 24-25, or ever for that matter. High risk is certainly a generous description of this budget as far as I can see. An outstanding homelessness deficit of 2.5 million, 14 million to come out before the end of 2028, and 23 million in the next 4 years? And are these all included in one global figure, or are they additional to each other? We don't know. We haven't been able to get the answer to that. Vague promises that departments will manage demand and deliver services within existing budgets. You haven't done that for years. So why should we be confident you're going to be able to do it now? The budget is full of holes. It is full of gaps. It is high risk. I cannot ask my members to vote for it. I respectfully ask Council to carry the reference back so that the Executive can have another think.
Is the amendment seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor. And reserve the right to speak.
Now, call upon the seconder of the amendment to speak.
No, that's at the end, Mr.
At the end. So are there any other speakers to the amendment? Okay, I just make a note. Yeah, yeah. Okay, first up, Councillor Shaw.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. What a lazy opposition. They have had, when did it go to Finance Review Group? 4 or 5 weeks ago? They've had 4 or 5 weeks to prepare an amendment. They fetch up the full council, knowing, and I hope you all vote against it because it's typical Liberal nonsense, knowing that if you just count back from when the notices have got to go out over the council tax, we'd have to have, by law, 3 meetings in 10 days to discuss it all. Is that wrong? Because you've got to go 28 days before April the 4th, I believe, Dev, you'd have them notices. So you've got to come back 28 days. It's a nonsense. It's a nonsense they could have avoided if they wanted to, by getting an amendment done fortnight ago after a Finance Review Group, submitting it to Dev as the standing orders of the council say they should, but they can't be bothered. But that doesn't, that doesn't bother me too much because that's just political games. What gets me is what Councillor Frank said earlier when he starts talking about free weekly bin collections and stuff like that. All that is trying to scare the people of Luton into things that aren't going to happen. I defy anyone to go through all the paperwork you've got tonight, anybody in here, and find me anywhere it talks about free weekly bin collections, because it's not there. You've got a councillor from the Liberals got on the feet and asked about why BTS is going to be so efficient and why we're getting efficient, so why we can afford to give more back to the council, like he's objecting that we're going to give more profit back to the council in future years. It is pure, lazy, opportunist politics where they aren't bothered about the council, they aren't bothered about the people of Luton, because if they were, they'd have done that amendment, submitted it like they're supposed to legal to Dev, so Dev could have a look at it. It's not even an alternative budget. It's just try and cause some confusion, get rid of it. You'd have to have a meeting of the executive, a meeting of Finance Review Group, another meeting of the council, all within the next 10 days, just to get the notices out legally, what you've got to do 28 days before April the 4th. It's a nonsense, and I hope everyone here votes against it. Everybody. Thank you.
Next up, Councillor Mahmood Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, here is a surprise. Over 20 years, these two-liners send it back to the executive. I've been seeing that for more than 20 years. If you are so passionate and you think there is so many gaps in the budget, why don't you put an alternative budget? You can do that, right? Right? Why can't you do? Why? Yes, you can.
Order.
Yes, you can.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Hussain.
Yeah.
Sorry, give me a second.
Right?
Please, can we just keep the...
If you think there are so many holes in the budget, then please, you had a chance on the FRD, you had a chance on before that to be able to do that. And then on top of that, cuts, and cutting the services. There is no proposal to cut the services. Why are you saying to the public, if you take this 1.4 million, there'll be cuts in services? There is no proposal as such. And I don't think you should be spreading the rumor, as my colleague said, like a 3-weekly bin. These are all trying to scare the public. If you've got an alternative proposal, come back with it, and then we can see the justification of that. But for 20 years, it's all these two-liners. That's all I've seen. I can prove it to you. I've probably got them in my locker. They are exactly the same, year in, year out. So come on, be more sensible and come up with some positive proposal if you've got any. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next up, Councillor Wynne.
Mr. Mayor, I have to say before I make my statement now, it does make a change, Councillor Shaw, because normally the line that your fellow councillor has adopted tonight is the one that you use. So congratulations on giving us a bit of variety tonight. Councillor Mahmood, you know perfectly well that on a legal basis we're not allowed to submit an alternative budget.
Guys, can I please remind members about decorum in the chamber? Just waiting for a bit of hush. Thank you. If any member does wish to speak, just please raise your hands. And Councillor Roach, you are on my list. Yeah. So back to you, Councillor Wynne.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The budget has to come from executive. As you well know, we are not legally allowed to supply an alternative budget, and you know that perfectly well, just as Councillor Shaw knows when he normally does this little bit in Budget Council. But thank you for the variety. At least it was a different voice tonight.
Next up, I've got Councillor Ghulam Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following on from what Councillor Franklin said, I think this is just political point scoring. I'd just like to remind our councillors that our opposition, they've spent a lot of time looking at the Green Book. It seems like they've been looking at the wood instead of the trees, and they need to step back and look at what's happening with local government finances. And they will be well aware, as Councillor Simmons said, we've had £170 million cut since 2014. And I think that our opposition is gaslighting the residents of Luton, because it was their government that got in there and started this austerity 14 years ago. And just to give you where we've got to, the LGA is reporting 1 in 5 councils are looking to probably declare themselves bankrupt over the next 12 months. And they're also saying over the next 2 years there will be £6 billion shortfall in government funding. I don't know why they're putting this forward. And I'd also like to remind them that our Section 151 officer has a legal responsibility to report if the budget doesn't balance. And I think by calling this and putting this motion forward, they're actually calling the integrity of our Section 151 officer to account. And I think that's really poor of them across the chamber. And I think going forward, I think they don't realise what they've done with the austerity. There's a triple whammy. As austerity bites, people want more services. At the same time, costs are rising and funding is being cut by government. This is a huge triple whammy to the people of Luton, and all they can talk about is an alternative budget. So I hope, members, you will vote down this motion. Thank you very much.
Next up, I've got Councillor Bassett Mahmood.
So, I mean, you're talking about unspecified budget cuts and reductions as though you had nothing to do with it. And all those unspecified budget cuts and reductions which you supported, the Tories haven't said anything today because they're nodding along. You're doing their job for them. You agreed with them in 2010. You agree with them now. We've had budget cuts of over £170 million. Local authorities' budgets fell by 40% in real terms between 2009-10 over the last decade, from 46.5 billion to 28 billion. And it's a bit like an arsonist shouting out fire. You've created this mess, but now you don't really want to deal with it, so you won't propose an alternative budget. And behind these devastating austerity cuts are entire communities like ours that have been devastated. So even 40 Tory MPs have written to Rishi Sunak saying, you know, we're struggling for finances, sort out a fair funding formula. I suppose you probably don't agree with them. And despite these challenging circumstances, you know, what has our council done? We've lifted children out of poverty. What you didn't want to pick up on today, you know, we're helping some of our most vulnerable residents. We've got a grant coming in for foster carers to cover 50% of their council tax bill to reward the work they're doing to help look after some of our most vulnerable children. And just for the sake of, you know, political point scoring, you're accusing us of making a profit, having decimated our budgets, and you've got no ideas of your own. So rather than kind of cheap political point scoring, I suggest you get behind this budget, and it shows that despite the financial difficulties we're having, we're still supporting our most vulnerable residents while you're devoid of ideas.
Yeah. Next up, I've got Councillor Javid Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sort of amazed because I'd like to understand that the Scrutiny and Finance Review Group chairs are, you know, the opposition party. Why have, I would suggest that they look at who they've got on there, because this should have been picked up there, not last minute. As far as we're concerned, the budget is balanced, otherwise we wouldn't be presenting. Well, we didn't get any of this to the executive, any recommendations to say that you've got these errors, and this last minute is just political. And I can't believe that you do this to our local people, because our local residents that we're trying to help who are suffering. And you've kept on about saying, oh, you're making profit, but don't you realise that we're allowed to, we don't want to subsidise people, but we are allowed to charge, when we're going through a huge inflation, we are allowed to charge for services to cover our cost. And that is all we are trying to do, is cover our costs. We are not trying to profiteer. And were the members on Scrutiny and Finance sleeping at the time? Why was this not raised at that time, when we would have had ample time to review and work with our accounts and our finance department to try and, if there was errors. So I don't know whose calculator is wrong, but somebody's calculator is wrong, is definitely not right.
Councillor Jackie Burnett.
Thank you. I won't repeat what my colleagues have said, but I wanted to say that, number one, I want to say thank you to the team and the officers, because I think it's quite insulting, given that we're not looking at Section 114, and given what a lot of councils are in now, we have weathered the storm. So, for our colleagues to say they don't believe we're going to achieve, when we can look back since 2010 and what we've had to grapple, our colleagues and appointments of senior officers are on the appointment panels. Yeah, it's not just Labour councillors that are appointing officers, yeah? Our colleagues are on there looking at the competencies, looking at the experience that officers we bring in need to deliver service and a balanced budget. So I think it's quite disrespectful to me, yeah, that the chief exec, there's officers that here have been with us before austerity and we've held hands. And now we're rocking up and saying, you know what you did? You did all this work for her, but somehow we don't believe you're going to deliver in the future. So I just wanted to say that. And the two, we're in a bad space, but we are better than many because we have worked together. And we need to continue to work together. We should be holding hands and holding the government to account with regards to where we are. Why are food banks a permanent feature in British society? That should not be acceptable. But somehow it is. It wasn't before 2008. Yeah? And my role being involved with APSI, I've realised English councils are in a state not Wales are looking at, and not Scotland. We got clapped. We all got clapped during COVID, thanking frontline services. APSI did a report, local by default. We have proved the importance of local government and local representation. We should be appropriately funded for what we do. And now, we've got our colleagues, as I said, that helped with austerity. Yeah, we lost everything, begging, housing stock, everything decimated in England. Is saying that we want them to go back to exec. Well, I know the legal and the government process in the council. There was time for you to be involved. So I don't want to repeat, but I thank officers for what they do. I thank my colleagues for weathering the storms, those that are still here while we haven't got Section 114 and 114. And I would ask people to look at those councils, red and blue, that are having their assets decimated. Yeah, they have had to sell assets that are for public use up in England specifically. And I thought I needed to just make this point. Yeah, we need to work together. We're not out of the storm, and the government's not saying that they're going to give us more money. Local government is important as the NHS. Adult social care we're meant to be doing. Children's service. More stabbings are going on in our community. What happened in Bristol can happen again here. This is what we need to be working on. Thank you, Mayor.
Now I call upon Councillor Steve Moore.
Yeah, thank you. Every year at this budget meeting, whenever we ask a question, so often the reply we get is, oh, it's your fault because of 2010. We've come today and we've asked questions about various holes that we've seen in the budget, either because we saw them because of our colleagues on FRG, or we saw them while going over the papers. And so often the reply at a budget meeting where we're discussing the technical issues of the budget is that you'll have to get back to us. And then when you want to attack us over that, you just come back once again to 2010 austerity. And no one is saying austerity was good, and no one is saying it hasn't put hardship on ourselves or anybody else. But to purely blame us when you consider that if it wasn't for us, we would have been going, it would 96 billion of public spending cuts across the country in 2010, as opposed to the 81 billion we actually did across the country. That is based on the Conservative, Labour and Lib Dem 2010 manifestos. 1 million more than our manifesto, I will give you, but also 1 million less than the Labour one from 2010.
Thank you. Next up, I've got Councillor James Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I just would like to say to the colleagues opposite, welcome to the reality of local government financing. These are the seeds that you sown in 2010. They're bearing fruit now here in 2024. It was their party that implemented the austerity agenda along with the Conservative parties, and who decided to hammer local government so they could disguise who was responsible for the loss of services. They chose to do it to local government because they thought they could blame it, that the people would then blame it on the Labour councils having to deliver government spending cuts. And I just want to pick up something on what Councillor Frank said when he said, why are we not raising it by 4.9% for the general fund? We can't do that. He knows full well that 2% is ring-fenced for adult social care as set out by the government. That's what we're doing, and that's what that money will be spent on, as is right, as social care is chronically underfunded as well. And as stated by my colleagues, this is an empty opposition who has never presented a serious proposal, as they are a party of no ideas, and in fact, they aren't really a political party at all. They're a misinformation leaflet delivery mechanism. This country needs a government that will deliver at the next general election. We need a Labour government. Thank you.
Before I bring in Councillor Roach, who's the mover of the original motion, are there any further speakers to the amendment? I do understand. Yeah, that's fine. So are there any other members? Yeah. So I now call upon the seconder of the amendment to speak, and it says here you have 7 minutes within which to make your point. Explain your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to do less than 7 minutes. Well, what can I say? I mean, it's pretty much the same thing we expect from a Labour council. It's everybody else's fault but their own. Maybe they have forgotten that before austerity, it was a Labour government that was in power for over a decade, and it did nothing better than wage war and spend a lot of the public's funds and drive this country down into a deficit. So that when the new government came in, they had nothing to play with. So there had to be austerity. So the root cause of austerity and everything that you are saying about is actually yourselves, your national government, that actually took this country down. Now, the Tories have not done any better recently, or in fact, when they were alone in power, and they are doing the same thing. This country is coming down because of Labour and because of the Conservative governments. Now, coming on to some of your points, you keep harping on about an alternative budget, which we have clearly told you, and you are well aware of, that the alternative budget cannot be provided in this meeting. There can only ever be one budget that we can ever vote on. Now, we have the power and we have the ability to provide an amendment, which we have. We have highlighted quite clearly and specifically the areas of your budget that are weak and there are gaps in there. You have not provided any constructive response to them, and yet you blame everything else but yourselves. And then the way you're bringing the council officers in, I mean, to be honest, from Councillor Ghulam Abbas's response, it looks like, is it the council officers running Labour, or are you running it yourselves? And then you're calling us lazy. So you really need to get a hold of yourself. If you are going to provide responses, make them constructive and make them relevant rather than blaming other people. Mr. Mayor, that's pretty much all I have said. My colleagues have actually covered quite a few points off that I wanted to mention, and that'll be the end of my 7 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, so I now call upon Councillor Roach, the mover of the original motion, to reply.
Can I just clarify here, if I may, because am I just talking on the amendment here, or am I talking like I was at the end of the budget, and so I can come back and still talk about the end of the budget? Thank you. Okay. Firstly, let's just deal with this. It's gone. Honestly, it's gone. And quite honestly, Councillor, it is an insult to these guys. It really is an insult that December the 18th, they received from the government their funding allocation. I got an email from Dev on Boxing Day because he had to work Christmas Day to try and present a budget here today. So it is an insult to everything these guys work hard to do, you know, and we need to support them, okay? So it is an insult. Let's talk about this. Firstly, has anybody read this? Dev's report. Come on, you can put your hands up if you like, if you read it. Okay. Well, surely if you read that, you understand what we're talking about here, what's going on, because it's all in there. Okay. Now let's just take it back a bit, because you're talking about gaps, you're talking about this. We've got a programme for transformation in this council, not just for savings, but to actually make the council a better place in the future in relation to ready for the future for 2040. So we are better at what we do. So the officers are better at what we do. And it's not just about savings. If you've got a programme that goes over 4 years, there's going to be some risk there, isn't there? There's going to be some risk. There's going to be something we can say, well, we don't know that because the transformation programme is going to come back in about 1 year's time and it will give us a delivery. And we can debate on that at that time. It'll go through scrutiny, it'll go through all the processes, it'll go through consultation, it'll go through all the things it needs to do. Then you can criticise, then you can talk about your gaps, okay? You can talk about it then. But we've got a plan in place. Deficit recovery transformation programme. That transformation programme is happening now. We hope to deliver on 4 areas this year. Okay, we hope to deliver. So it is an insult. If I move on now into relation to talking about the transformation programme, if you look at a 4-year plan, there's going to be risks. So what do? We analyse the risks. What do we analyse? Okay, let's put some reserves and contingencies in place. Did you look at the reserves and the contingencies in there? This is why I don't want to talk about the Green Book, because everything is in here is what we should be talking about, not the Green Book. You can put that away next year because I'm not going to be interested. This is what we want to talk about. We want to talk about the budget. We want to talk about what's going to happen. In here is all the reserves, the contingencies we put in place to manage the risk over the next 4 years. Okay? It's there. You had all the chances, the guys on Financial Scrutiny Review Group, to say something at the time, but you chose not to. Again, you bring it back here. You bring it back here and insult our hard-working officers. And it is an insult, I'm sorry, it is. If you see how hard these guys work, that's what's upset me more than anything, in all fairness. And if we go back now into relation to alternative budget, I hope as new leader, you write to one of the officers who can say to you what you're supposed to do about an alternative budget if you want to present one, because you can. Your new councillors, you can present an alternative budget. Look it up, you can do it. If as leader you want to do one, write to the officers. They give you all the process, the protocols to deliver to the Section 151 officer by a certain date. Do that, and you've got a debate going on. Without that, you haven't got any debate going on. You shouldn't really challenge us on it at all, okay? And again, no more unfactual stuff, please. None more about bins or costs or anything. It's all unfactual. I won't call it, no, I won't, no. It's all unfactual, and we're not going to accept that, and we will fight that again all the way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I've thrown it out, so I hope my members also throw it out.
So, the amendment is before the council. All those in favour, please show. Yeah, okay. Okay, so you can put your hands down. That's been recorded. All those against, please show. And hands down. That sounds like a little game. Councillor Khan, put your hand down. And any abstentions? Okay. The amendment is lost. Okay. Are there any further amendments? Okay. Thank you. We are now moving back to the original motion. Does any member wish to speak to the original motion? Thank you. So the original motion is before the council. Sorry.
Councillor Simmons has reserved the right.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Councillor Simmons reserved the right. So to speak, so I want to ask Councillor Simmons to come in.
A lot of the comments that have been said by my colleagues have been said, but I really want to reiterate the fact that we're all elected to represent the community of this town. Different parties, different views. And every year, for as long as I can remember, there's been no opposition at a budget council meeting that I call a full-blooded opposition, where they put forward ideas on how you would run the council or deal with the budget. Reference back is very, very easy, and you Liberals do it every time. This year, the Tories didn't even ask a question, so I can only assume, Stuart, that you agree with our budget and you're going to vote for it. I can only make that assumption. So, and I just feel that, you know, people vote for you. I may question their voting, but they vote for you on the basis they expect you to represent them. And I don't see where you represent them in this budget council meeting, because a reference back is easy done and nothing from the Tories. To me, you've let down the people that voted for you.
Yeah. I'd like to bring back in Councillor Roach to speak on the original motion. Sorry, I think that opportunity has passed, Councillor Franks. I did present it earlier before, because Councillor Simmons did reserve the right, so no member puts his hand up. Okay, Councillor Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did inform the council about the Section 1 Fine Officer and the finance team receiving the allocation on December the 18th, which is disgusting, which meant it spoiled their Christmas holiday. You know, everybody deserves a break, and it was disgusting. We always have to start with why we are here. Since 2010, the figure is now 170 million taken out of the budget since the beginning of austerity. I will always maintain that austerity is a false ideology that did not have to be forced onto the people of this country. Inventive, creative and being radical could have put the country on a different path, but we chose a different one. Well, you chose a different one. However, the Tory and Lib Dem coalition decided it wanted the working people to repay a debt that was unachievable, and they knew it. It was just an excuse to cut the public spending, and that's why we are where we are today in this situation. Not just Luton Council, councils up and down the country. How do we know that? Well, the proof is right in front of us. The world is just about to see its first trillionaire. I don't know if anybody's aware of that. Its first trillionaire. Just think about that. First trillionaire. The rich are getting richer. Other families are struggling, really struggling, and they're scraping through. And for the first time for many years, I'm hearing about destitution. That's not right. We're not going to have that. There needs to be a change. Local authorities can be that change, but we need a government to believe in them to invest in local authorities and public services. Just take a look around. NHS, the police, the local government, all the pillars of societies, they're all breaking down due to the lack of understanding by this government of what these services mean to people and the reliance people have on them. In 25-26, a black hole in local government funding is predicted to be 4.5 billion. I'm going to pause. 4.5 billion. Just think about that. 4.5 billion. Average council faces 33 million perceived deficit. 33 million, average councils. And they have tough decisions to make. Just think about the effect we've all been trying to say here that's having on people's lives. You must see it. We see it in our wards. We see it every day. I'm sure that some people are fed up of me as I keep repeating it, but Luton Cowan Borough Council always starts off in the wrong place. We're 5 million in deficit. We start off there. We face the same pressures of the London Borough. If you look at the demographic, the population and the pressures of the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham, you would think it's Luton. One difference, probably an extra 15 million funding than us, okay? So what we need to do, as Councillor Simmons says, we need a government, don't mind what colour, to get on with the fair funding review, which the Conservatives keep kicking down the road and will not deal with. We need that, to put that in place, to get us in the right place. Luton Police need to be funded the same as a metropolitan borough, not as a rural unitary. We have an airport in our town. NHS that has people at its heart with proper funding, recruitment and retention programme. We need to look after it. We need to look after the NHS. The people rely on it. In its funding, Luton are reliant on receipts from council tax, business rates and grants. The majority of Luton properties are in the lower band and the present system is unfair on the council and the Luton residents, where it seems that the council with a higher band majority receive a better allocation of council tax support. The latest government data, which shows enabled spend per person, shows England 1,143 per person, East of England 1,035 per person, Luton 924. We've got to change that. We need a proper council tax funding allocation. It needs to be reviewed. Again, they said they're going to do it. Again, they're kicking it down the road. I am really sorry that we had to increase our council tax this year, as we had no choice. The government informed councils that they could increase council tax to the maximum without a referendum. However, if we choose not to do that, we have to find money and the savings elsewhere within this budget. I appreciate this may be difficult for some families, but we have put in place a good support system and would join any person, no matter what ward, to come forward if they're struggling with a council tax, so we can give them support, help them with their council tax payments. Government have promised a review on council tax funding, but again have kicked down the road. The government has been promising a review on business rates. At present, Luton Council keep 49% of business rates they collect. Government wants to replace grants based to more business rate funding and increase to retaining 75% of revenue. We'll get on with it. Let's do it. Again, they keep promising a review, so we just need them to get on with it. By putting these points into place, we'll put Luton in the council in a better position. We, as Councillor Simmons said, we will lobby government and any future government, even if it's Labour, to get on with it. Believe in public services, invest in public services and let us have the support for the people we represent. This administration will continue to invest in 2040 ambition as it's important to the future of Luton. And those of us who were at the annual conference just recently, good to see you there, David, must have felt positive about the direction it was going, because I did. However, it's the here and now that we need to grapple with, and the key uncertainties for Luton are around inflation demand for services as a result of the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis. The housing crisis in Luton is paramount to the ambition of the 2040 vision. In the absence of a national strategy for building social housing, then we need to react in a different way. That's us, the Labour group, not you. We need to react in a different way. We need to look at the present right-to-buy policy, and we need to inform governments and say, have a look at this. A right-to-buy policy, okay? Why not suspend it for a while? Every house, council, social house we build goes back to private sector within about 3 years. It's not right. That needs to be looked at. It was built in the 80s, I believe. In the 80s, it's now not fit for purpose in its present way. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but it's not fit for purpose in its present way. The housing issue in Luton is an area that this administration will be working on closely going forward. As portfolio holder for finance, I see my role in that to see how we can support the building of housing in a cost-effective, sustainable way. We've got to look at something different. Don't know what that is, but we've got to look at it. The programme today still offers a very positive programme of going forward with investment in the capital programme, as mentioned earlier. The programme has the staged Butte Street Major Regeneration Project, which will create jobs, leisure amenities and over 292 new homes. There is also additional funding for highways, schools, housing, electric charging and temporary accommodation purchase scheme. This shows the Council's commitment to ensure the roads are repaired and resurfaced, and not only filling in potholes, investing in our infrastructure and also green projects, including local electric infrastructure, a housing stock, and we're investing in speed cameras. We will continue with the war on waste. We have invested in 5 street cleaning machines, enforcement officers in the town who are finding people on the spot for littering. These are areas that the residents felt strongly about and want action on, and it will continue whilst this Labour group is in administration. In spite of the astronomical cuts received from the coalition of the Lib Dem and Tories and then the Tory government, we are still delivering over 700 services. This administration will always do its best to protect service, David, deliver services, react to the needs of the people in Luton and look at ways of how we can support Luton residents into permanent accommodation. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for a healthy debate. The motion is before the Council. Members will be asked to cast their vote individually to be recorded in the minutes.
Councillor Abbas. For. Councillor Ahmed.
Against.
Councillor Ajisola.
For.
Councillor A. Ali.
Against.
Councillor Ambier.
Against.
Councillor Baker. Councillor F. Begum.
For.
Councillor Y. Begum.
For.
Councillor Bridgen.
Against.
Councillor Burnett.
For.
Councillor Chowdhury.
For.
Councillor Farouk.
For.
Councillor Franks.
Against.
Councillor Fry.
Abstain.
Councillor Gallagher.
Against.
Councillor Hanif.
For.
Councillor J. Hussain.
For.
Councillor J. I. Hussain.
For.
Councillor S. Hussain.
For.
Councillor Isles. Councillor M. Hussain. Councillor Keynes.
Against.
Councillor A. Khan.
For.
Councillor Lovell. Councillor Mahmood.
For.
Councillor K. Malik.
For.
Councillor Marshall. Councillor Mead.
Against.
Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Moore.
Against.
Councillor Nasser.
For.
Councillor Nichols.
For.
Councillor Petts. Councillor Raja.
For.
Councillor Roach.
For.
Councillor Saleem.
For.
Councillor Shaw. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Steer.
For.
Councillor Stevens.
Against.
Councillor D. Taylor. Councillor J. Taylor.
For.
Councillor Underwood. Councillor Wynne.
Against.
The motion is carried. I now invite Councillor Shaw to move agenda item 6.2.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Before I move the item, there's a couple of things I've got to say. First of all, Rob had it easy. He only had Dev to deal with. But I had Atika to deal with, and she's a lot harder than Dev. And this time round, the HRA has been probably the most difficult in all my 40 years on the council, for the simple reason the government has made a recommendation that none of us don't think anyone in this council chamber agrees with, at 7.7%. At 7.7%, we'll still have the cheapest rents in Bedfordshire of housing associations or councils. That's not the point. The point is, if we'd have gone any lower, it would have cost us £6.5 million in new development money. And we cannot afford to not do the new developments for the simple reason Rob was on about earlier. We've got so many people approaching us at the moment, 27 in 1 week last week, for temporary accommodation where we've got to do the investigations. I've never known it like it is out there. But we've wanted to keep everything going we can. And I'd like to say, first of all, thank you to Mahmood, Dave Taylor and Bob, because they did a real in-depth look at me at the start of last year into shelter blocks, which has resulted in us finding next to £300,000 in service charges, what is only going to go back into shelter blocks in improvements, and every shelter block in the town is going to give them a choice of where they want to spend their £8,000 or £9,000, what we're giving back to them. But it's more than that. We've got to do the energy efficiency work, what we need to do. That's why the HRA capital programme is still over £10 million each year, so we can carry on investing in our stock. But also, if you look through the account, you'll see an extra £200,000 per year now being put in for carbon reduction on our housing stock. And I think that's more important. That's as important as anything, because the more carbon reduction we can do, the more energy efficiency stuff we can do. We can keep the rents down. If we can't keep the rents down because of government interference, and that's all it is, we can keep the people's other bills down in the property by making it their eating bills and their energy bills less. So we'll keep all the programme going. We'll spend, I think it's over the next 5 years, a total of 150 million on new build. We'll keep the carbon reduction stuff is new, the £200,000 a year what's in the programme, and we'll keep the new build going as long as we can afford it. But a lot of that's going to rest on what the charges for materials are and everything else, because materials in the building trade at the moment, I don't know where they're getting this 5 or 6% inflation from, because materials in the building trade are more like 12 and 14%, the inflation on those materials. There's only so far we can go and still give value for money. But it's our intention to keep going, keep the lowest rents in Bedfordshire, but keep the biggest investment in our own housing stock in Bedfordshire. That's a dead straightforward proposal. And on top of that, one little extra cherry, because me and the officers had a lot of discussions this year on the HRA before we come to an agreement. One of our officers from accounts came up with, and it was a T, came up with the fact that 30% of our tenants don't receive housing benefits. What we have done, we've put a fund into place this year, what can help out those tenants what are going to struggle at 7.7%. It's a minimum of 100 grand, but if we have to find more money, we'll do it. It won't be for the people on benefits, it'll be the people who are working but struggling, and we'll find a way that we can assist them. And it still stays within the government recommendation at 7.7%. There'll be no increase on service charges in shelter blocks at all this year. Instead of that, so what I said earlier, we're going to give them money back. And that money will be invested how the people want. During the next few months, Councillor Steer and Councillor Hussain have agreed to look for me and go through every single line of the service charges we charge our tenants to see if we can identify savings there as well. So next year, no matter what the government says, because I'm confident we'll all be here, and the new Labour government will be in place, so we haven't got a problem with that. There won't be a rent restriction on us. The Labour government will leave it up to us to do what we want, and by them identifying savings in the service charges, we'll be able to put an even lower rent increase in next year and still say the lowest rents in the whole of Bedfordshire. With that, I move the proposal.
Is the motion seconded? Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. I now invite Councillor Roach to move agenda item 6.3.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation set out in paragraph 2, 1 to 2, 5 on page 42 of the report circulated separately. I further move that in relation to the Council's divestment motion passed on 21st November 2021, set out at paragraphs 103 to 113 of the report to Bedfordshire Pension Fund, additionally be requested to undertake an assessment of its investment portfolio with a view to disinvest in institutions which have links to companies that create and sell arms to governments around the world, that this statement be included in the Treasury Management Strategy 24-25. As this is a matter for approval by full council rather than a recommendation to full council from the executive. Thank you, Mr.
Is the motion seconded? Are there any questions? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? No, I've done that. Okay, sorry. Are there any amendments? Sorry. Thank you. Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. That concludes the business of this ordinary meeting of the council. I would ask members to remain in their places for the extraordinary meeting of the council that will immediately follow. Okay. I now invite Councillor Simmons to move the motion. Guys, we're not finished yet. I now invite the Councillor Simmons. Could we please have some order in the chamber? Councillor Petts. Councillor is in session. If you wish to have conversations, please do so outside the chamber. I now invite the Councillor Simmons to move the motion to admit Dr. Nazia Khanam, OBDL, Mr. Mick Harford, Imam Qazi Abdulaziz Chisti, MBE, Mr. Derek Ludlow, MBE CBDL, and Mr. Jeffrey Farr, MBE DL, to be honorary free men and free women of the Borough of Luton. I would advise that for this motion to be passed, 2/3 of the members present must vote in favour of the proposal. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very pleased to make this recommendation to Council. These are 5 people who've done an awful lot of good work in the town and will have an opportunity on the special meeting of the Council to relay that. So I won't keep people this evening. Just move the resolution tonight that we hold a special meeting to honour these people.
Is the motion seconded?
Seconded, Mr Mayor.
Does any member wish to speak to the motion? This motion is before the council. Do I read that bit out then? Yeah. Members will be asked to cast their vote individually. Sorry, it's procedure. Sorry.
Councillor Abbas. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Ajisola.
4.
Councillor Ali.
4.
Councillor Ambier.
4.
Councillor Baker. Councillor F. Begum. Councillor Y. Begum.
4.
Councillor Bridgen.
4.
Councillor Burnett.
4.
Councillor Chowdhury.
4.
Councillor Farouk. 4. Councillor Franks. Councillor Fry. Councillor Gallagher.
4.
Councillor Hanif.
4.
Councillor J. Hussain.
4.
Councillor J. I. Hussain.
4.
Councillor M. Hussain. 4. Councillor S. Hussain.
4.
Councillor Isles. Councillor Keynes. Councillor Khan.
4.
Councillor Lovell. Councillor Mahmood.
4.
Councillor Malik.
4.
Councillor Marshall. Councillor Mead. Councillor Miller.
4.
Councillor Moore.
4.
Councillor Nazar.
4.
Councillor Nichols.
4.
Councillor Petts. Councillor Raja.
4.
Councillor Roche. 4. Councillor Salim.
4.
Councillor Shaw. Councillor Simmons.
4.
Councillor Steer.
4.
Councillor Stevens. Councillor D. Taylor. 4. Councillor J. Taylor.
4.
Councillor Underwood.
4.
Councillor Wynne.
Councillor Baker, Bacon or F. Bacon are back. Sorry, Councillor Baker and Councillor F. Bacon.
Oh, and
He's missed it. Okay. The motion is carried. I would advise that further to the above resolution, an extraordinary meeting of the Council will be held on Tuesday, the 26th of March 2024 at 6:45 p.m. to present to Dr. Nazia Khanum, Mr. Mick Harford, Imam Qazi Abdulaziz Chisti, Mr. Derek Ludlow, and Mr. Geoffrey Farr scrolls recording their admission as honorary freemen and freewomen of the Borough of Luton. That concludes the business of this extraordinary meeting of the Council. I thank you for your attendance. Could I, a message from Councillor Simmons, could Labour members please remain in their seats